Chapter 1. Homecoming's Bitter Embrace. The humid July air slammed into Brick Brody Harlow like a physical blow the moment he stepped off the military transport at Fort Benning. 3 grueling deployments with the Army Rangers in the Middle East's most hostile corners were finally behind him. His duffel bag felt feather-light compared to the weight of all he had witnessed and endured over the past 4 years. Brody's fingers instinctively went to his phone, the first time he'd checked it since setting foot on American soil. He expected a message from Melanie, his wife of 12 years, confirming she was en route to collect him. Instead, the words on the screen twisted his gut into a knot of ice. "Don't bother coming home. Locks are changed. The kids don't want to see you. It's over." He stood frozen beneath the relentless Georgia sun, a solitary figure amidst the surging tide of his fellow soldiers and their joyous reunions. The message burned into his retinas as fragmented memories flickered through his mind. Their last video call just 3 weeks prior had seemed utterly mundane, though admittedly their conversations had grown increasingly strained during this last deployment. Nothing had hinted at such a brutal finality. Brody's thumb hovered over the phone's keypad. A dozen furious replies clawed at his consciousness. Instead, he typed a mere 2 words, "As you wish." Anyone who truly knew Brody would have recognized the quiet menace coiled within that seemingly innocuous phrase. During his time as a ranger, he had become infamous for his ice-cold precision. When chaos erupted around him and other soldiers yelled or panicked, Brody remained chillingly calm. "As you wish," was what he said before executing the most devastating operations with surgical accuracy. He made only one call. "Leona Fisk speaking," a crisp professional voice answered. "This is Brody Harlow. I need your services, immediately." "I thought you weren't due back until next week." "Plans have changed. Can you meet today?" "For you, absolutely. My office in 2 hours." Brody hailed a taxi, giving the driver an address not to the suburban home where his wife and children, Trevor 16 and Amelia 14, supposedly no longer wanted him, but to a downtown Atlanta high-rise housing the office of one of the state's most formidable divorce attorneys. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, he allowed himself a fleeting moment of raw emotion, his eyes squeezed shut against the tidal wave of betrayal. Then, as he had done countless times in combat, he compartmentalized. This was now a mission, and Brody Harlow never failed a mission. Chapter 2. First Moves. Leona Fisk's office screamed success and whispered intimidation, gleaming surfaces, sharp angles. The attorney herself mirrored her surroundings, impeccably tailored in a severe suit, platinum hair pulled back in a tight knot, eyes that assessed your worth the moment you crossed her threshold. "Well," she drawled, leaning back in her chair after Brody laid out the bare bones of his situation. "She waited until you were practically on American soil to tell you you're surplus to requirements. That's cold, even by my standards." "I need to know what I'm dealing with," Brody stated, his voice flat. "Then I need options." Leona's smile was predatory. "What exactly did you mean when you texted, 'as you wish'?" "It means I respect her desire to end our marriage, but it will be on my terms." "Good. The weak try to salvage what's unsalvageable. I don't think that's why you're here." "No," Brody confirmed. "I'm here to win." The next hour was spent meticulously crafting the first phase of what Leona termed the nuclear option. By the time he left her office, Brody had signed documents that would unleash a series of financial and legal maneuvers timed to execute precisely at 9 a.m. the following morning. After securing a room at a discreet downtown hotel, Brody made his second strategic call to Wyatt Dennis, his oldest friend. They had grown up together in rural Pennsylvania, enlisted together, though Wyatt had left the service 5 years prior. "I need surveillance on my house," Brody explained, giving Wyatt a concise rundown of the situation. "I need to know who's coming and going." "You think there's someone else?" Wyatt stated, more than asked. "I need confirmation and details." "I'm on it. And Brody, sorry, brother." By evening, his phone vibrated incessantly. Melanie. He ignored the calls, letting them roll to voicemail. Then the texts began. "What have you done? Answer your damn phone. You can't just disappear." At precisely 10:37 p.m., A series of images pinged onto Brody's phone from Wyatt. Dark blue Audi parked in his driveway, a tall man with an expensive haircut exiting the vehicle, Melanie greeting him at the door with an eager embrace. The last photo showed them silhouetted in the doorway, not the awkward greeting of new lovers, but the comfortable intimacy of an established relationship. His name is Preston Hayes. Wyatt's accompanying text read, Realtor. Been to your place 6 times in the last 2 weeks. Kids seem familiar with him. Brody placed his phone carefully on the nightstand. The pieces were clicking into place. That night, he slept the deep sleep of a man who had found clarity of purpose. At 9:17 a.m. the next day, his phone erupted again. This time it wasn't Melanie, but her attorney, a Mr. Rutherford, whose voice climbed several octaves as he shrieked, "You have no legal right to do this to her trust fund. 19 missed calls and you pull this stunt. This is extortion. You can't." Brody disconnected the call and turned to the window, a faint, cold smile playing on his lips. Phase 1 complete. Chapter 3. Shadow of a Soldier. Brody's journey from a Pennsylvania farm boy to an elite ranger had been forged in the crucible of exceptional discipline and an innate tactical genius. The youngest of 4 brothers raised by a widowed father, he had learned early that survival demanded strategy. While his brothers relied on brute strength, Brody cultivated patience and precision. He had met Melanie Stanford during his first leave after ranger school. She was a law student at Georgetown, brilliant, ambitious, and from a wealthy New England family. Their attraction had been instant and all-consuming. 6 months later, they were married. Her family had reluctantly accepted the union, their reservations about her choice of a military man simmering beneath the surface. When Trevor was born, Brody was stateside, working as a tactical instructor. Those were good years. Melanie was building her legal career, and Brody was climbing the ranks within the Rangers. After Amelia's arrival, the deployments grew longer and more dangerous. Each time Brody returned, the distance between him and Melanie seemed to have widened. During his second deployment, Melanie's father had passed away, leaving her a substantial trust fund with intricate stipulations. One clause stated that her spouse could not access the funds without her explicit consent. Another dictated that in the event of a divorce, the funds would remain in trust until her remarriage or her 55th birthday. What Melanie didn't know was that Brody had spent years studying financial law and structures, a hobby born from his tactical mind's obsession with understanding systems. He had identified a loophole in her trust, one that even her father's expensive lawyers had overlooked. It involved the temporary transfer of management rights during periods of voluntary absence from the marital residence by one spouse. By sending that text as he returned from deployment, she had inadvertently triggered that clause. Brody hadn't touched a single cent of her money, but he had legally frozen the entire trust, preventing any withdrawals or transfers. "So," Leona stated, sliding a file across the table during their next meeting in her sleek office, "you were right. Preston Hayes isn't just your wife's lover. They have a history that predates your marriage. He was her boyfriend from law school." Brody nodded, his expression unwavering. According to credit card statements, hotel bills, and restaurant receipts, they rekindled their relationship approximately 18 months ago, shortly after you left for your last deployment. 18 months. While he was clearing buildings and watching his comrades die, Melanie was building a life with another man, a man who had been waiting in the wings. "And my children?" Brody asked, the first crack of emotion in his voice. Leona's expression softened slightly. "This Preston is playing the father figure. Weekend trips, expensive gifts. Your son seems resistant. His social media suggests he's angry at both adults. Your daughter appears more receptive." Brody absorbed the information, his jaw tight. "The house? Has she taken out any new mortgages or loans?" "No, but there's something interesting about the property adjacent to yours. It was purchased by one of Preston Hayes's shell corporations 6 months ago. The timing of the purchase suggests they may be planning to merge the properties." The pieces clicked into place in Brody's mind. Not just an affair, a complete replacement. Hayes was literally moving next door, poised to absorb not only Brody's family but his physical space as well. "They're efficient," Brody observed, his tone cold. Most affairs are impulsive. This was orchestrated. Agreed, Leona replied. The good news is they've made mistakes, big ones. For example, Hayes transferred $200,000 to Melanie 3 months ago, which she used for renovations on your house. That's marital property she altered using her lover's funds. She's also been paying his utilities from your joint account, effectively subsidizing their affair. Brody nodded. That's good, but not enough. I need something that gives me leverage with the children. Leona raised an eyebrow. The courts tend to favor the mother. The courts favor stability and safety, Brody corrected. Find me something that proves she can't provide either. As Brody left Leona's office, his phone vibrated with a text from Wyatt. Got something significant. Meet at the usual. The usual was a small, unassuming diner on the outskirts of Atlanta, a frequent haunt during their military leaves. Stepping inside, Brody spotted Wyatt in a back booth. His posture remained militarily rigid, even in civilian clothes. How bad is it? Brody asked, sliding into the booth. Depends on your definition, Wyatt replied, pushing a small flash drive across the table. Your wife and her boyfriend aren't just planning on cohabitating. They're making moves to relocate to Costa Rica. Property already purchased, school applications for the kids, all for next month, right after the school year starts. The kids don't know yet. Brody slipped the flash drive into his pocket. How did you get this? Wyatt's smile was grim. Let's just say Mr. Hayes needs better cybersecurity for his cloud accounts. Brody nodded, processing the information. His family wasn't just moving on without him. They were planning to vanish to another country. The coldness inside him crystallized into something hard and unyielding. I need one more thing, Brody said. Access to our house. Not to cause a scene, but to retrieve something that belongs to me. They'll be at a charity gala downtown tonight, and the kids will be at Hayes' place with his housekeeper. Wyatt studied his friend's face. Brody, whatever you're planning, is necessary, Brody finished for him. You with me? Their eyes met in a silent communication forged in the heat of battle. Always, Wyatt finally said, but remember who you are. Brody's smile didn't reach his eyes. That's precisely what I'm counting on them forgetting. Chapter 4. Buried Truths. From the outside, the house looked exactly as Brody remembered it, a spacious colonial in a prestigious suburb. Inside, however, everything had shifted. The comfortable leather sofas he had chosen were gone, replaced by sleek modern furniture in cool grays and blues. Family photographs had vanished, the walls now adorned with abstract art. It was as if Melanie was trying to erase any trace of their shared history. Brody moved through the transformed space silently, his gaze detached and precise as he cataloged the changes. In the home office, he found what he was looking for, a hidden wall safe behind a framed print. The combination was Trevor's birthday, exactly as he had left it. Inside was a small fireproof box containing his grandfather's World War II medals, documents from his own military career, and a sealed envelope. He took only the envelope, leaving the rest untouched. Turning to leave, he noticed something on Melanie's desk, architectural plans. He photographed them carefully. Detailed blueprints for merging their property with the adjacent one, creating one sprawling estate. The plans were dated 14 months prior, 4 months into his last deployment. Before leaving, Brody made one last stop at his children's rooms. Trevor's room remained largely as he remembered it. Sports trophies, gaming posters, organized chaos. On his desk, a framed photograph caught Brody's eye. Him and Trevor fishing 3 years ago, both grinning widely. It was the only picture of Brody left on display in the entire house. Amelia's room, however, was a complete transformation, now decorated in sophisticated purples and silvers, looking more like a college dorm room than a 14-year-old's bedroom. On her corkboard, Brody noted concert tickets, school awards, and a photograph of Amelia, Melanie, and Preston seemingly on a ski trip. They looked like a picture-perfect family. He exited as silently as he had entered. The house keys he had used, keys that were supposedly no longer functional, he deliberately placed on the kitchen counter where Melanie would find them. The following morning, Brody met with Harris Bentley, a former intelligence officer turned private investigator, a referral from Wyatt. "I need everything on Preston Hayes," Brody explained, "not just the surface-level stuff. I need to know what he's hiding." Harris, a wiry man with piercing eyes, nodded. "Everyone's hiding something. How deep do you want to dig?" "Down to the bedrock." While Harris began his investigation, Brody moved on to the next phase of his plan. He contacted Trevor's lacrosse coach, arranging a casual run-in with his son after practice. When Trevor emerged from the gym, he froze at the sight of his father. "Dad?" The teenager's voice cracked. "Mom said you weren't coming back." "I'm here, son," Brody replied simply. Trevor's face cycled through shock, confusion, and anger. "Where have you been? It's been 4 days since you landed." "I had some things to sort out. Your mother made it clear I wasn't welcome at home." Trevor looked away. "She said you abandoned us, that you chose the Rangers over us. Is that why you didn't want to see me?" "I never said that," Brody countered sharply. "She said you wanted a clean break, no messy goodbyes." Brody kept his expression neutral despite the surge of fury. "I see. Are you and Mom getting divorced?" "Looks like it." Trevor scuffed his shoe on the ground. "Because of Preston, partly. I hate him," he muttered. "He acts like he's doing us all some big favor. Amelia buys it, but I don't." They talked for half an hour. Brody was careful not to badmouth Melanie, but he made sure Trevor understood that many of his assumptions were based on lies. When Melanie's SUV pulled into the parking lot, Brody stood. "I have to go. But, Trevor, whatever happens between your mother and me, I'm still your father. That will never change." As Brody walked away, Trevor called after him, "Dad, are you just going to let him take everything?" Brody turned back, his face a mask. "No, son, I'm not." Later that evening, Harris Bentley delivered his initial findings. On paper, Preston Hayes is squeaky clean, successful ventures, solid reputation, respected in the community, but there are inconsistencies. 3 former business partners who suddenly sold their shares for pennies on the dollar. A building inspector who changed careers after approving one of Hayes's controversial developments. And most interestingly, Harris leaned forward, a pattern of targeting wealthy, married women as investors while their husbands are otherwise occupied. Brody's attention sharpened. Explain. He ingratiates himself with women whose husbands are frequently away, military, international business, politics, becomes their friend, confidant, then business advisor. Eventually, the husband is out of the picture, usually a divorce, and Hayes is left with access to the family fortune through the woman. And the Costa Rica connection? Harris's expression darkened. That's where it gets concerning. Hayes owns property there, yes, but he also has ties to some less than reputable enterprises. The area where he bought land is known as a haven for those looking to evade financial or legal obligations. He's planning to isolate her, Brody concluded, cut her off from family, friends, the familiar legal system. Potentially. The timeline is aggressive. The title transfer on your house is already in motion, closing scheduled in 3 weeks. Brody nodded. That's why she needed the divorce to be quick. They're liquidating assets before they disappear. "One more thing," Harris added. "That envelope you took from your safe, what was in it?" "Insurance," Brody replied. "Something I suspected I might need one day." The envelope contained the documents of an agreement Brody had made with Melanie's father before his death, a promise that in exchange for Brody signing a prenuptial agreement limiting his claim to Melanie's family money, the old man would establish a separate trust fund for Brody's military earnings to protect them in the event of a divorce. The agreement was properly notarized but had never been attached to the main trust documents. That leverage, combined with Harris's findings, gave Brody what he needed for the next stage. He called Leona. "I'm ready to move," he stated. "Set up a meeting with Melanie and her attorney for tomorrow." "They're demanding the immediate release of the trust," Leona warned. "Tell them I'm willing to discuss terms. Conference room at your office, 2 o'clock. "And if they refuse?" Leona asked. "Melanie has a timeline she needs to adhere to," Brody replied with quiet certainty. Chapter 5. The reckoning. The tension in the conference room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Melanie sat opposite Brody, her once familiar face now a mask of cold disdain. Beside her, a silver-haired attorney named Rutherford exuded practiced indignation. Leona, in contrast, appeared relaxed, almost amused. "This is harassment and financial abuse," Rutherford began, his voice booming. "Your client has maliciously interfered with assets that are explicitly excluded from marital property." Leona offered a saccharine smile. "My client exercised a perfectly legal right triggered by Mrs. Harlow's own actions. Perhaps if she had waited for his actual return home before changing the locks and barring him from his residence, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Melanie's eyes narrowed. "You weren't supposed to be back for another week." It was the first time she had addressed Brody directly. Her voice was tight, controlled. "Deployment schedules change," Brody replied evenly. "But your plans were well underway regardless, weren't they?" "What plans?" Rutherford interjected. Brody slid a folder across the polished table. "The purchase of property in Costa Rica, school applications for my children, airline tickets." The color drained from Melanie's face as she flipped through the documents. "How did you—" "You were planning to take my children out of the country without my knowledge or consent," Brody continued, his voice low and dangerous. "That's parental kidnapping." "It's a vacation home," Melanie snapped. "And you weren't around for most of their lives anyway." "Absent serving my country," Brody corrected. "Not absent by choice. You had a choice." Melanie's composure finally cracked. "Every re-enlistment was a choice. Every special assignment was a choice. You chose the Rangers over us every single time." "And you chose Preston Hayes long before my last deployment," Brody countered, his gaze unwavering. 14 months ago, to be precise, when you commissioned the architectural plans to merge our property with his." Rutherford cleared his throat, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should focus on the immediate issue of the trust fund." "I will release the trust," Brody stated, "on 2 conditions." Melanie's relief was palpable but short-lived. First, the children remain in Atlanta for the remainder of the school year with a standard joint custody agreement. No international relocation without a court order. Rutherford nodded. "That's reasonable." "Second, I want the truth from you, Melanie. Not about the affair, but about what you told the children." Melanie's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You told them I abandoned them. That I didn't want to see them." "I was protecting them from pain," Melanie retorted. "What was I supposed to say? Your father might come home in a body bag, but don't worry." "You lied to them," Brody said quietly. "Trevor never said he didn't want to see me, neither did Amelia. That was your manipulation." Silence hung heavy in the room. Even Rutherford looked perturbed. "I want you to correct it," Brody continued. "Tell them the truth. Then we can discuss the release of the trust." "And if I refuse?" Melanie challenged, her chin lifting defiantly. Brody slid another document across the table, the agreement with her father. "Then this gets attached to the trust documents. Your father made me certain promises that supersede your prenuptial agreement." Melanie's face paled as she scanned the document. "Dad would never—" "Your father respected service and sacrifice," Brody stated. "He also recognized that you inherited his ruthlessness. This was his insurance policy against exactly this scenario." 30 seconds ticked by before Melanie gave a sharp single nod. "Fine, I'll tell them the truth. But this changes nothing, Brody. I'm still divorcing you. There's no going back." "As you wish," Brody replied, his voice devoid of emotion. That evening, Brody received a text from Trevor. "Mom told us what really happened. Why didn't you just call us yourself?" He replied. "I needed to make sure I could be a part of your lives before making promises." "Are you back for good?" came the immediate response. "Yes. No more deployments." A long pause, then a text from Amelia. "Amelia's mad at Mom. She's crying in her room." Brody's chest tightened. "Tell her I'll see you both this weekend, at my place. Do you have a place?" "Will by Saturday." The next phase unfolded with unexpected speed. Brody needed to secure housing urgently, establish stability. But first, he needed to neutralize Preston Hayes. Harris Bentley's deeper dive had unearthed a disturbing pattern. Hayes's business model involved a sophisticated form of real estate fraud, purchasing properties through shell companies, artificially inflating their value with cosmetic renovations and manipulated appraisals, then selling them to investment groups. That included his mistresses or their family trusts. Technically not illegal, as long as everyone knows what they're investing in, Harris explained. But Hayes omits crucial details. 3 of his former lovers lost millions before they realized what was happening. And Melanie, she's already sunk $1.2 million from her trust into his latest venture, the one in Costa Rica. The property exists, but the permits, infrastructure, and projected returns are all smoke and mirrors. Brody processed the information. So his plan is to move her and her money to Costa Rica, where U.S. financial regulations don't apply? Precisely. And once there, without her support system, she'll be completely dependent on him, Harris finished. For the first time, a flicker of concern for Melanie cut through Brody's anger. Despite everything, she was the mother of his children. She had betrayed him in the most profound way. But perhaps she, too, was a victim of someone equally adept at deception. I need evidence that will stand up in court, Brody decided, and I need to act fast. What are you planning? Harris asked. To give Preston Hayes exactly what he wants, Brody replied, a dangerous glint in his eyes. Or at least, what he thinks he wants. Chapter 6. Unraveling Preston Hayes had built his life on calculated risks and a keen understanding of human nature. He prided himself on his ability to identify vulnerabilities and exploit them with finesse. So when Broderick Harlow, the inconvenient husband he had expected to be swiftly and cleanly disposed of through divorce, requested a personal meeting at Hayes's downtown office, curiosity outweighed caution. Mr. Harlow, Hayes greeted him with practiced cordiality, rising from behind his imposing desk. This is unexpected. Brody's gaze swept over the man who had been sleeping with his wife. Tall, athletic, but with a softening around the edges, possessing the practiced charm of someone accustomed to getting his way. I thought it was time we spoke directly, man to man. I appreciate that, Hayes gestured to a chair, though I'm not sure what there is to discuss. Melanie has made her decision. That's precisely why I'm here, Brody stated, remaining standing, to acknowledge that decision and propose a resolution that works for everyone. Hayes's expression remained neutral, but his posture shifted slightly in almost imperceptible tightening. I'm listening. You want Melanie, you want my house, you want my family, Brody stated, his voice even. I accept that. But the current approach, lawyers, court battles, will drag on for months, maybe years. No one wins. What exactly are you proposing? A clean break. I sign over my share of the house to you. I agree to the divorce terms. I even support your relationship. Brody forced the last words out. In exchange, I want guaranteed access to my children and a financial settlement that reflects my contributions to the marriage. He watched Hayes carefully, searching for a trap. That's surprisingly reasonable. Melanie described you as intractable. Military service teaches you to recognize unwinnable battles, Brody replied, and to strategically regroup. I see. Hayes leaned back in his chair, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. And what would this financial settlement entail? $2 million, a fraction of what a protracted legal fight will cost you. You seem very confident about what a legal fight will cost me, Hayes observed. Brody shrugged. I've done my homework. Something in his tone made Hayes wary. A sliver of uncertainty flickered across his face before the confident mask returned. I'll need to discuss this with Melanie. Of course, but this offer is time-sensitive. 24 hours. That's not much time for such significant decisions. I thought you were a man who appreciated decisive action when opportunity knocks, Brody countered. After Brody left, Hayes immediately called Melanie, relaying the conversation. Neither of them knew that Harris Bentley, with the help of a cleaner who owed Wyatt a favor, had installed surveillance equipment in Hayes's office the previous evening. "He's desperate," Hayes told Melanie, his voice laced with triumph. "This is perfect. We can wrap things up quickly and be in Costa Rica before winter." "It sounds too easy," Melanie's voice replied through the speaker. "Brody doesn't give up. He's a soldier, not a businessman. He's out of his element. You don't know him like I do. He's playing some angle. Even if he is, what can he do? The trust is unfrozen. The house sale is moving forward. We're all set." "What about the kids?" Melanie asked. "We'll abide by the custody agreement until we're ready to leave. By then, he'll be settled somewhere, and the kids will prefer our setup anyway, especially with the private school options in Costa Rica. And if he tries to contest an international move, it'll be too late. Trust me, Mel. This is what we've been working towards. Everything is falling into place." The recording captured it all. The casual disregard for the custody agreement, the calculated manipulation, the clear intent to commit fraud through the Costa Rican investment scheme. It was exactly what Brody needed. The next day, Brody received a call from Hayes accepting his terms. A meeting to sign the paperwork was scheduled for the following morning. That evening, he met with Leona to finalize their countermove. "This is a delicate dance, legally speaking," Leona cautioned, reviewing the plan. "A judge could view the recording as entrapment." "The recording is just insurance," Brody assured her. "The financial evidence is what matters. The documented fraud scheme, the misrepresented investments. We just needed Hayes to confirm his intentions regarding my children." "And you're sure you want to tip Melanie off?" Leona asked, her brow furrowed. After everything she had done. Brody's expression hardened. "This isn't about Melanie anymore. It's about protecting my children from both of them." The pieces were set on the board. Phase 3 was scheduled to commence at 9 a.m. the following day, precisely when Hayes believed he was securing his victory. That night, Brody received an unexpected visitor at his hotel room. Amelia stood in the hallway, her face streaked with tears, but her small frame radiating a fierce determination. "Mom doesn't know I'm here," she blurted out. "Trevor helped me sneak out." Brody ushered her inside, his heart pounding. "Amelia, you can't just— Why didn't you fight for us?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "You just disappeared when you came back. You didn't even try to see us." "I was told you didn't want to see me," Brody said gently. "And you believed her?" Her voice broke. "After everything? I wrote to you every week. I sent emails when you had access. I waited for you to come home and then— nothing." Brody knelt before his daughter, the stark realization of how much he had grown in his absence hitting him like a physical blow. "I'm fighting for you now. I promise you that. Mom's selling our house. We're leaving." "No, you're not," Brody said firmly. "Not unless you want to." Amelia studied his face, her eyes searching. "Preston says you can't stop it. He says you signed papers." "Preston doesn't know what's coming." "What does that mean?" Brody chose his words carefully. "It means sometimes people aren't who they say they are, and sometimes the truth needs to come out before someone gets hurt." "Are you going to hurt Preston?" Amelia's eyes widened with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Not physically," Brody assured her. "But yes, I'm going to stop him from taking what's mine, including my family." Amelia nodded slowly. "Good. I hate him. He's nice when Mom's around, but he's different when she's not." A cold dread seeped into Brody's veins. Different how? "He talks to us like we're stupid. Tells Trevor he needs to grow up and get over missing you. He told me I need to accept reality because you never really cared about us anyway." Her voice dropped. "Last week, he grabbed Trevor's arm when Trevor argued with him. It left marks." The controlled fury Brody had been carefully containing crystallized into something lethal. "When did this happen?" "Thursday. Trevor wouldn't let him in his room, and they fought." "Does your mother know?" Amelia shook her head. "Trevor didn't want to tell her," Amelia continued, her voice small. "He said it would just make everything worse." Brody took a deep breath, his mind recalibrating his plans. "I need you to go home now, but things will change tomorrow. I promise you that." After ensuring Amelia was safely back home, With Wyatt's help to avoid detection, Brody made one last call to Leona. "We need to move the timeline up," he stated, "and add another element to our strategy." "What happened?" she asked, her voice sharp with concern. "Everything," Brody replied, his tone grim. "Hayes crossed a line he can't uncross." Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The Hayes Development Group offices occupied the 27th floor of a prestigious Atlanta business tower. Glass, chrome, and a calculated air of intimidation. When Brody arrived for the 9 a.m. meeting, Hayes was already waiting, flanked by two lawyers and wearing a smug smile. "Mr. Harlow," he greeted, extending a hand, "I appreciate your pragmatism in this matter." Brody ignored the offered hand. "Where's Melanie?" "She should be here." Hayes's smile tightened. "Melanie has entrusted me to handle the financial details. She'll join us for the final signing." "That won't work," Brody stated calmly. "I need all parties present before we proceed." One of Hayes's lawyers, a nervous young man, shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Hayes assured us Mrs. Harlow was amenable to these terms." "Did she agree in writing?" Brody pressed. "I have her power of attorney for these matters," Hayes interjected smoothly. "This isn't a business deal," Brody countered. "It's a divorce settlement involving my children. Either Melanie is here or we reschedule when she can be." Hayes's jaw tightened for a fleeting moment before he forced another smile. Of course. Let me give her a call." As Hayes stepped away to make the call, the conference room door opened again. Leona entered, followed by a stern-faced man in a conservative suit. "Mr. Harlow, my apologies for the delay," Leona said briskly. "Agent Donovan was held up in traffic." "Franklin Donovan, FBI, White Collar Crime Division," the man introduced himself, placing his credentials on the table. "I'm just here as an observer." Hayes's lawyers exchanged uneasy glances. "What's the meaning of this?" Hayes demanded, turning back to the table. "Insurance," Brody replied. "Will Melanie be long?" "She'll be 20 minutes, Hayes said, his confidence visibly shaken. "Perhaps we should postpone until—" "Perfect timing," Brody interrupted. "That should give us just enough time to review some additional documents I've brought." Leona distributed folders to everyone present. "These materials document a 7-year pattern of securities, fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy spanning 3 states. Hayes laughed, but the sound was brittle. "This is absurd. A transparent attempt at extortion." "No extortion," Brody said evenly. "Just facts. You've been defrauding previous romantic partners through manipulated real estate investments. You're attempting to do the same to my wife and her trust fund. And just recently you physically assaulted my 16-year-old son." Hayes's face drained of color. "That's a lie. I never—" "We have photographs of the bruising," Brody cut him off, "and witness testimony." The conference room door opened again and Melanie walked in, looking confused and increasingly alarmed as she took in the scene. "What's going on here?" she demanded. "Preston, why is there an FBI agent here?" "Mrs. Harlow," Agent Donovan nodded to her. "Please join us. We were just discussing your investments in the Costa Rican development." "My investments?" Melanie looked at Hayes, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "What investments?" "The $1.2 million transfer you authorized 3 weeks ago," Brody prompted, "for the Villa Paraíso development." Melanie froze. "That's not an investment. That's a property purchase. Our retirement home." "There is no retirement home," Brody said gently. "That development exists only on paper. The property you believe you purchased is an undeveloped plot of land worth less than $100,000. "That's impossible. Preston showed me plans, photographs, renderings, stock photos," Leona interjected, sliding additional documents towards Melanie. "These are the actual property records, the permits, or lack thereof, and the wire transfers showing where your money actually went." Melanie sank into a chair, her eyes wide with disbelief as she stared at the evidence. "Preston, tell me this isn't true." Hayes's mask of confidence shattered completely. "Melanie, this is a misunderstanding. The project is in the early stages." "The project doesn't exist," Agent Donovan stated flatly. We've been investigating Mr. Hayes's activities for 18 months. Your husband's evidence simply accelerated our timeline. Melanie's head snapped towards Brody. You knew about this. I suspected something wasn't right when I saw the Costa Rica plans, Brody replied. The investigation confirmed it. So this whole meeting was a setup, Hayes hissed. Your husband set us both up. No, Brody corrected. Just you. Melanie is as much a victim of your fraud as your previous partners. Hayes's lawyers were already packing their briefcases, muttering about needing to consult with their firm. What about Trevor? Melanie asked, her voice barely a whisper. What did you mean about an assault? Brody slid a photograph across the table, Trevor's arm showing distinct finger-shaped bruises. That night, Thursday, when Trevor had refused to let him into his room, Melanie stared at the photograph, then at Hayes, horror dawning on her face. You hurt my son. He was disrespectful, Hayes protested weakly. I barely touched him. A sharp crack echoed through the conference room as Melanie's hand connected with Hayes's cheek. You lying bastard. You promised me you would never. Mrs. Harlow, Agent Donovan interjected calmly, I suggest we continue this conversation at our offices. We'll need a formal statement from you and your son. The rest of the scene unfolded in a blur. Hayes was led away by 2 additional FBI agents who had been waiting outside. Melanie, in a state of shock, agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation. When the room finally emptied, only Brody, Leona, and Melanie remained. Why? Melanie asked, her gaze fixed on Brody. After everything I did to you, why did you protect me from him? I didn't do it for you, Brody replied, his voice flat. I did it for Trevor and Amelia. They've been through enough. Melanie nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. What happens now? Now, Brody said, standing, you tell the children the truth, all of it, and then we figure out the next steps. As he walked towards the door, Leona followed. Melanie called out after him, her voice laced with a raw vulnerability. Did you ever love me at all? Or was I just part of some mission plan? Brody paused at the doorway. I loved you enough to let you go when I thought that's what you wanted, and I loved you enough to stop you when I realized you were being dragged into something dangerous. But not enough to forgive me, Melanie whispered. No, Brody agreed. Not enough for that. Chapter 8. Aftermath. 3 weeks later, the legal landscape had drastically shifted. Preston Hayes faced multiple federal charges for fraud and financial crimes. His assets were frozen, his reputation shattered. The FBI investigation had expanded to include 6 additional victims across 3 states. Melanie had moved out of the family home and into a modest apartment. The sprawling house now stood empty, a silent monument to the unraveling of their lives as the legal complexities were sorted out. The trust fund had been salvaged, most of it anyway, thanks to Leona's swift legal maneuvering. The Costa Rican real estate scheme had imploded completely. Brody, meanwhile, had purchased a comfortable 4-bedroom house 15 minutes from the children's school. He had accepted a position as a security consultant for a large corporation, providing the stability his family needed and allowing him to utilize his military expertise. A custody agreement had been reached without the need for court intervention. The children split their time equally between both parents, holidays alternating. Trevor had already staked claim to the largest bedroom in Brody's new house as mostly mine, while Amelia was still navigating her complex emotions towards both her parents. On a crisp autumn Saturday, Brody sat on his back porch watching Trevor practice lacrosse drills in the yard. Amelia was inside, ostensibly reading, but in reality, eavesdropping on the conversation through the open window, a fact both Brody and Trevor tacitly acknowledged. Mom says she's sorry, Trevor said abruptly, pausing with his lacrosse stick. Like 100 times a day, it's getting old. She has a lot to be sorry for, Brody replied carefully. Will you ever forgive her? Trevor asked, his gaze fixed on his father. Brody considered the question. Forgiveness is complicated, Trevor. I can co-parent with her for your sake without forgiving what she did to our marriage. That sounds harsh. Maybe, but some things can't be unsaid or undone. Trevor spun his lacrosse stick thoughtfully. She said she got caught up in Preston's lifestyle, the money, the connections, said it made her feel important again. Did she feel unimportant with me? Brody asked, genuinely curious. She said, when you were deployed, it felt like she was just waiting all the time and it scared her. Brody nodded slowly. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation he could understand. Fear made people do desperate things. He had seen it countless times in war zones. What about Preston? Trevor asked. Do you feel sorry for what happened to him? No, Brody replied honestly. He hurt you. He tried to steal our family. He deserves what's coming to him. Mom says he might go to jail for a long time. That's a common consequence of fraud and assault. Trevor hesitated. I wanted to tell you about his hand, but I thought you wouldn't care anymore. The words hit Brody like a physical blow. Trevor, look at me. There is nothing in this world that would ever make me stop caring about you or your sister. I will always protect you, always fight for you. Do you understand? Trevor nodded quickly, blinking back tears. Yeah, I do now. From inside the house, Amelia called out, Dad, Mom's here. Melanie stood awkwardly in the living room, dressed more casually than Brody had seen her in years. Jeans, a sweater, minimal makeup. The polished corporate lawyer image had been replaced by something more authentic, more akin to the woman he had once fallen in love with. I need to talk to your father alone for a few minutes, she told the children. Why don't you two gather your things for the weekend? Once they were alone, Melanie's gaze drifted around the house, warm, inviting, already showing signs of becoming a real home. You've done a good job here. The kids seem comfortable, Brody conceded. They're happier than they've been in months, Melanie admitted. Trevor's grades are improving. Amelia's actually talking to me again. She paused. I owe you an apology, a real one, not just legal maneuvering. You don't owe me anything, Melanie. I do. My insecurities and fears led me into the arms of a predator. I betrayed our vows, I lied to our children, and I tried to erase you from our lives. Her voice trembled. And despite all of that, you saved me. I saved our children, Brody corrected. You were collateral damage. Melanie flinched but nodded. Fair enough, but I am grateful, and more sorry than I can ever express. Brody studied the woman he had once built his life around. The anger that had fueled him for the past weeks had subsided to smoldering embers. In its place was something colder, more permanent. Not hatred, but a fundamental separation. I accept your apology, he said finally. For the children's sake, we'll build a functional co-parenting relationship. But that's all it can ever be. I understand, Melanie whispered. I didn't come here hoping for reconciliation. I needed you to know that I recognize what I lost, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. Before Brody could respond, the children returned with their weekend bags. The moment passed. An acknowledgement had been made, but not an absolution. Later that evening, after dinner and board games with both kids asleep in their new rooms, Brody sat on his porch with a glass of whiskey. His phone vibrated with a text from Wyatt. How'd the meetup with Melanie go? As expected, Brody replied. Apologies, regrets, the usual. And you're still holding the line? Some betrayals can't be undone, Brody texted back. His phone rang almost immediately. You know, Wyatt said when Brody answered, forgiveness isn't just for her, it's for you too. I don't need forgiveness, Brody countered. I need clarity, and I have it now. Clarity, huh? Is that why you're sitting alone drinking whiskey at midnight? Brody couldn't help but smile. I'm celebrating a victory. Mission accomplished. Bullshit, Wyatt said good-naturedly. The mission was punishment. Now that it's over, you don't know what's next. There was truth in that, Brody realized. The cold, focused purpose that had driven him since receiving Melanie's text had been achieved. Preston Hayes was facing justice. The financial deceptions had been exposed. The children were safe and beginning to heal. But a void remained. What do you suggest? Brody asked. Moving on, Wyatt replied simply. Not with Melanie. That ship has sailed. but with life. The war's over, brother. Time to come home for real. Hanging up, Brody considered his friend's words. The soldier inside him recognized the wisdom. In combat, you completed the mission, honored the fallen, and then prepared for the next objective. You didn't linger on the battlefield once it was secure. He looked up at the stars, the same stars he had gazed at from desolate camps and mountain outposts. For the first time since his return, he felt the weight of his armor begin to lift. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe never, but the possibility of something else, something new. Chapter 9. Permission. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. The terms were equitable, the negotiations surprisingly civil. The co-parenting arrangement was proving successful, both children thriving in the stability of their new normal. Preston Hayes had taken a plea deal, receiving an 8-year federal prison sentence with restitution orders that would keep him financially crippled for decades. Brody's security consulting firm had expanded, his military expertise proving invaluable in the corporate world. He had added 2 more former Rangers to his team, creating a brotherhood of support that reminded him of what he had valued most during his service. On a warm spring afternoon, Brody stood watching Trevor play in the state lacrosse championship final. Beside him, Amelia cheered her brother on with enthusiastic fervor. On Amelia's other side, Melanie maintained a respectful distance from Brody, close enough to present a united front for their son, but far enough to acknowledge the boundaries. "He's really good," a voice beside Brody observed. He turned to see an athletic woman with curly auburn hair watching the game with a discerning eye. "He works hard," Brody replied. "Definitely scholarship potential there," she commented. "I'm Vanessa, by the way, college recruiter, Northwestern University." "Brody Harlow, and that's my son, number 17. Impressive stick work." Their conversation flowed easily throughout the first half of the game. Vanessa's knowledge of the sport was impressive. At halftime, Amelia tugged on Brody's arm. "Dad, I want a hot chocolate. Can you get me a water too?" "Sure," Brody replied, handing her a few dollars. "Ms. Harlow," Vanessa said, nodding towards Melanie, "can I get you anything?" Melanie looked surprised. "Oh, no, thank you. And it's Stanford now. I've gone back to my maiden name." "Mom, help me carry everything," Amelia offered, a transparent attempt to give her father some alone time with the attractive recruiter. As they walked away, Vanessa smiled. "Smart girl. Not subtle, but smart." Brody chuckled. "They both think it's time I started dating again." As Trevor put it, "So, Dad, when are you going to start dating again?" The question hung in the air, her interest palpable. 6 months ago, Brody wouldn't have recognized the opportunity, let alone considered pursuing it. Now he found himself actually contemplating the possibility. "Maybe," he conceded. "Eventually." Vanessa nodded, respecting his guarded response. "Well, when eventually comes, maybe we can grab coffee, talk about your son's lacrosse future and other things." She handed him her card, their fingers brushing lightly. "I'm in town until Sunday." The game resumed before Brody could reply, but something had shifted. A door had creaked open to possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to consider. After Trevor's team won the nail-biting final, the celebration moved to an early dinner at the teenager's favorite burger joint. Melanie declined, citing work commitments, leaving Brody alone with the children. "Who was that woman you were talking to?" Trevor asked between bites of his burger. "College recruiter," Brody replied. "From Northwestern. She was very impressed with your playing." "Uh-huh, Dad." Trevor rolled his eyes. "She gave you her number. I saw." "For recruiting purposes," Brody insisted, though a faint smile betrayed him. "You should call her," Amelia declared. "She was pretty, and she knows lacrosse, so she's smart." "I'll think about it," Brody conceded. Later that evening, after dropping the children off at Melanie's apartment, Brody returned to his quiet house. He placed Vanessa's business card on his desk, not yet ready to act, but no longer automatically dismissing the possibility. His phone vibrated with a text from Melanie. "Trevor hasn't stopped talking about the Northwestern recruiter. Says maybe she's the one for you. Just a friendly heads up that our son is planning your wedding." Brody couldn't help but laugh. "Thanks for the warning," he texted back. "I'll manage his expectations." You deserve happiness, Brody, came Melanie's unexpected reply. I mean that sincerely. He stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Finally, he simply typed, "The kids do too. Thanks for today." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was an acknowledgement that they had moved beyond the battlefield and into whatever lay ahead. Separate paths, but forever connected by the children they both loved. The next morning, Brody woke early for his usual run. As he laced up his shoes, his gaze fell on Vanessa's business card, still lying on his desk. After a moment's hesitation, he picked it up and slipped it into his wallet. The war was over. He had protected what mattered most. He had stayed true to his principles, never backing down, never forgiving those who had betrayed him, but also not allowing bitterness to consume him. Stepping out into the dawn light, Brody thought of the text message that had started it all. Don't bother coming home. Locks are changed. The kids don't want to see you. It's over. His response had been simple. As you wish. Not a surrender, not an agreement, but the quiet declaration of a man who understood that sometimes the most powerful response was to accept the challenge and fight back on his own terms. The battle had been won decisively, and now, for the first time in a long time, Brody Harlow was truly coming home.